Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Product School webinar. I'm Nikki, and I'm going to be hosting the webinar today along with Brian Kelly. So welcome, everyone. All right, so just in case you didn't know, Product School offers product management certificates online and at our 20 campuses worldwide. On top of that, every week we offer some amazing local product management events and host online webinars, live streams, and Ask Me Anything sessions. Head on over to productschool.com after this webinar to check them out. So today we also have an awesome guest presenting with us. I'd like to introduce you all to Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly is a senior level SaaS product management professional who has spent over 2 decades in the industry, building world-class products that delight customers. He currently deploys his skills as a senior product manager at UpToDate, which is a part of the Wolters Kluwer Health. Brian is an aspiring speaker who strives to keep transforming each company he leads with advanced technology using intelligent digital, social, and mobile solutions. So feel free to leave questions at the end for Brian in the comments, and towards the end of the presentation, we'll definitely address as many as we can. So without further ado, let's all welcome Brian. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So hello, everyone. I'm Brian Kelly, and this is actually one of my favorite subjects within product management. So I look forward to walking you through it today. So the value of UX in building products, there's a lot to it. And here's what I would like to walk through today. First, let's talk about why improving the user experience. So there's a lot to it. It tends to be very multifaceted, and why making changes can really differ depending on the company and the unique space within the industry. Challenges. Well, UX tends to be very much of an intangible item. So that creates some unique challenges, as well as some of the other challenges that go along with product management, such as gaining consensus and building business cases. So then we'll talk about overcoming challenges, and then ultimately talk for a few minutes about building business cases and building the strongest one that you can to support what you need to do. And finally, we'll pause there for questions and go through the questions that you have. Well, user experience, if you were to ask 10 different people what it means, it can generally be probably 10 different things. So I really like this grid here. This is the user experience honeycomb, and it breaks down all the components to it. And what I find helpful about this is it really helps people break down the various components of it, and then determining what is most important for a particular service or business that you're working with. So a lot of times when people think of the user experience, it's largely about how usable a site is. So as you can see, that's one of the components here. But it's a whole lot more than that. So at any given time, it might be a balancing act to include all of these things, or maybe it's just some of them. For example, if your service or website is search related, then findable is probably going to be the big thing, or one of the big things. So that would be improving the search function, or maybe improving navigation. And then along on the other side is accessibility. So this is something that has taken a lot of limelight in recent years. So it's making sites more accessible. And that can be a big part of the user experience too. So really it's a question of managing all of these things and determining which one of these in particular is going to be most relevant. And again, it could be more than one of them. But the key here is to focus on the big ones that are really going to make a difference to the customer. So let's talk for a couple minutes about an example here of how improving the user experience can make a big difference. So this relates to healthcare, and this is the domain that I've been in for over 8 years, so it's one I understand pretty well. So taking a step back, what's going on in the healthcare business? And what are some of the pains and what are some of the challenges of customers? Well, first off, doctors spend a lot of time on the job. So generally speaking, it's 40, 60 hours a week. And in a lot of cases, it's a lot more than that. Full quarter, it's 61 hours, maybe as many as 80. So a lot of time spent on the job. And what makes that even more challenging is the amount of time spent on administrative work. So this can be 2 times the amount of time spent with patients. It can be, so really the challenge here in healthcare systems is how can we get greater productivity and how can we get clinicians to be spending their time wisely? So if by focusing on the user experience and the systems and the applications that they use, that can really have a huge impact. So making them more usable, making things more findable. Well, I think you can see through this example how that really can help customers and really contribute to a company being successful in what they offer. So the bottom line is that improving the user experience in this example really can save clinicians time and improve and drive efficiencies. So there's one example, but now let's talk about this in broader terms. So we talked about improving important customer metrics in the example I just showed. But what about some other things? Well, increasing user satisfaction and loyalty. And I suspect we all have our favorite websites, and some of those are probably the results of just a really great user experience. One that comes to mind pretty readily as a product manager is SurveyMonkey. So there are a lot of examples out there, but I really just love SurveyMonkey, and there are lots of survey tools out there these days, but it's one that by focusing on the user experience, it really tends to improve or increase user satisfaction and loyalty. So once you have the service and keep using it, as long as you're seeing continuous improvements and still like it, and it does what you need it to do, it really helps to improve loyalty. And along the same lines is to make it a key differentiator. So a lot of websites, it's all about the content. Some it's all, a key component is the user experience. But the user experience today can be really viewed as a key differentiator and one of the key reasons that customers would buy your product. If we think about the value on the enterprise side, so say you have a service and you look to your customer base to get ongoing price increases from or to demonstrate continued investment, well, this is a really nice way to do it. So making sites more usable, improving accessibility, it really packages nicely together in telling a great story and how investment you're making is adding more value and really justifying any kind of price increase, or if nothing else, improving satisfaction. The other thing I wanted to mention here is creating positive impressions for prospects. So it's not only about the service that you're trying to sell, but what is that first impression of a customer? So they come to your site and they're looking to sign up, they're looking to subscribe, they're looking to purchase something. Well, as we know, first impressions can often be lasting. So if you have a really just fantastic user experience in what those first impressions are, and also going through the ordering process and finding additional information before wanting to purchase, well, that's very important too. So here are some of the, I would say at a high level, these are good reasons on why improving the user experience can pay some huge dividends. And for any business, it's likely to be it might be some of these, might be all of them. And I think the key is determining what is most important. Challenges. Well, I find with the user experience that this tends to be one of the more challenging things within product management, largely because it's an intangible. And it all starts with understanding what the customer pain points are. So I'll talk in more detail about each of these in a minute. Prioritization, how does UX compete with other priorities on your roadmap? Building consensus, always a big part of the equation for anything product management related. And then ultimately creating a really solid business case. So let's talk a little bit more in a little more detail in each one of these. So first, understanding pain points. So this is all about taking a step back and really having a firm grasp in terms of what the key problems are. So it's easy to make UX changes. It's easy to make ongoing changes, whether it is as little as improving colors within a button or how a user might interact with it. It might be big, it might be improving a search function. But what are the key problems? And what data do you have to support it? And what I would say about this whole concept is that it all starts with the research, but what I really like to emphasize is to keep it simple. So there's research can come from various different ways, whether it be in-app surveys. We'll talk a little bit more about what I have here called the system usability scale, anecdotal feedback, stakeholder feedback, analytics that you have, and unmoderated studies to see how people really use your product. Well, what I would say here is that there's all kinds of great data here, all kinds of data points, and it can be rather overwhelming. What I would say here is that keeping it simple and coming up with those analytics that are really going to best track results and find out what the problems are a critical success factor. And from here, I would say establishing baseline metrics is important too. So an example there. So say you've identified a key problem or one you want to measure is the amount of time it takes to use a search function and get a user to what they're looking for. Well, where are you starting from? And how might you measure that on an ongoing basis? So I referenced the system usability scale, and I really just love this tool for a number of reasons. One, it's really simple to administer. And as you can see from the questions here, it's a total of 10 questions. And for each one of them, there are 5 response options ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And what this does is allows you to really really understand what are the big issues and what are the big problems. So number 3, for example, I thought this website was easy to use. Well, how can you better measure that? And the system usability is a great way to do that. And this has really become an industry standard. What I like to do in administering this is not only have these questions, but to have some open-ended questions as well. So that's where you can get some anecdotal comments. So it would be questions like, what is the one thing that we can improve upon? Or what are the 3 biggest things that you have difficulty with when using this site? So I think it's good to have one, to use that as a baseline metric, and also to use this as a before and after measurement after enhancements have been made. I talked earlier about how keeping it simple is important when doing research, and I just love this book. I would highly recommend it if you haven't read it. It's a great quick read. It's probably a little bit over 100 pages. And really what it speaks to is just using a whole lot of common sense to doing research and web usability in general. You don't have to have a large budget, and a lot of this can be broken down into simple terms. So again, I would highly recommend this book if you haven't seen it or heard of it. Prioritization. So, okay, so you've gone through the process of understanding what the major pain points are, what some of the problems are. And from there, I would recommend coming up with the short list. So whenever you do some kind of study, you're getting all kinds of input and you're getting all kinds of ideas. Well, one of the challenges in product management is that you can't do them all. And prioritizing all of them and coming up with the major pain points and prioritizing from there is really important. And from there, saying just relentlessly focus on what matters most is important as well. So you have this, you have, say, one area that you want to focus on. Don't be distracted from what you're really trying to accomplish. And that'll allow things not to get watered down. Coupled with that is, I would say, it's not so much what a product manager says yes to, but it's more about the ability to say no. And for 100 great ideas, if you are effectively able to say no to most of them and focus on, say, the top 10, which are going to be the most relevant and the most important to customers, that's also critical for success. Gaining consensus. What I found with UX related work is that, well, a couple of things that I want to touch upon here. First, establish informal working groups. So maybe there's some people in the organization that have a particular vested interest in the user experience. Or maybe it's some people who just really have some thoughtful ideas on what can be most helpful or how to do some research. Well, bring those people into a group and make it informal. Another way to gain consensus is to be just a really good storyteller and use the data and let the user's voice come through loud and clear. So coming up with what the pain points are and why it's important to customers and what it's going to accomplish can really do a world of good to build consensus within an organization and to really explain why it's relevant and why it's going to help. Another thing I will comment here is that using verbatims I found is a really just great way to tell the story from a user's eyes and also to build consensus and agreement on what the right things to do are on making improvements. Another thing I like to do is to engage stakeholders in research. So whether it's reviewing a survey when appropriate, some people might have an expertise in that. Some people might just have really good input. That's just a great way to build consensus too. So keep people involved early and often. Sit in on user groups. Sometimes I have our development group or a few people in the dev area to sit in user sessions and really get close to what some of the pain points are and understand through the customer's eyes what the market is telling us. And then share results. So after research is done, after you have various data, share it. And what I'm not suggesting here, share it to the world. And I'm not saying that every little detail should be shared with everyone, but a small working group and just share the results and make it more of a group project, knowing full well that at the end of the day, it will be you and really product management making the decisions. But it's just great to keep various people in a small group involved throughout the process and making it as collaborative as possible. Building business cases. So as I alluded to earlier, this is often viewed as something that's intangible. So it's hard to define. It can also be recognized as a nice to have. So, okay, these UX enhancements would be really nice to have, but is it really a must have for, say, next year? They can also be reviewed or viewed as non-revenue generating. So, okay, if we do these enhancements, what is it going to deliver in bottom line results? So the challenge here, and what I think can happen quite nicely, is to translate the intangibles into a compelling story. So it's really pulling together what I talked about in the last few slides and looking for the improvements that can be made for a customer and equating it to the company benefits. So using the example that I used earlier, it's along the lines of if we can save our users some time, how does that make our product more successful? And what does that mean for the ability to increase our customer base or make it more likely that existing customers are going to renew? In building a business case, I think it's also important to show how results will be measured. So if you have, say, a new product, that's pretty easy to measure how many people purchase it. But with UX, it's a little bit different. So it could be things along the lines of the system usability scale that I discussed earlier. So it could be, okay, so these are the areas that we're trying to address. Our site isn't as high as it should be, and things are easy to find. So if we make these enhancements, what I'm suggesting is that it will improve in these ways, and this is how I'm going to measure it. The other thing I'd like to suggest in building a business case is that it really should be integrated with new products and features. So it's really two things. It's not only ongoing improvements, which hopefully can be within the DNA of your company, but it's also as new products and features are being built. So what is the research that's being done throughout the development cycle about making them usable, about making them accessible, and all those other things that go into making just a really nice experience for the user. So that walks us through the advantages of making UX improvements. Hopefully, hope you found that to be helpful. And at this point, I'd like to open up to questions.
All right, thanks so much, Brian. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. The first one is, what are some important KPIs for UX?
Well, some of the important KPIs are things like user satisfaction. It could be the system usability scale. It really depends on the business, okay? In other words, if it was heavily reliant on, say, a search function, well, then UX could be amount of time that took from when you got on the site to finding what you're looking for. Another UX component could be how people feel about the product, and that can be measured in a number of ways too. So it really depends on the business, but the user experience overall is about satisfaction, how they feel about it. And I would say another good place to start is to look at that, the grid I showed earlier, and digest it that way and come up with KPIs in that regard.
Great. All right. So what would you say to someone who is looking to transition from a UX background into a product management background?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say start with what you know, and you know the user experience part of it pretty well. So I would say if you can, do maybe you can get more on the research side, which can be into product management. It could be volunteering. I mentioned earlier about the whole aspect of collaboration and being in informal teams. Maybe you can just get to know a product manager and ask if you can help out a little bit here and there. Ask them if you can participate in, maybe it's brainstorming sessions on how any kind of new product development idea that's going on, things of that nature. It can also be taking courses like this and just developing your level of expertise.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. A couple more questions. So we love to ask this question to different product managers. What would you do in your first 30 days as a product manager?
In a product manager role, what I would do is get to know the people and get to know the products and ask a lot of questions. So I find with the best people who come in, it's the inquisitive mind. It's those who come in and show a real interest in getting to know how things work. And maybe it's in the first 30 days, I'd ask someone for a demo. And just think of it as building blocks and just recognizing that there's a lot to learn. We're starting with who the key players are and understanding how the big machine works, I think is just a really great way to start.
Great, thank you. That was great. Great advice. So we're just about to wrap up here. Do you have any final advice for aspiring product managers?
Well, I would just say it's a great field. I really enjoy being in it. I would say, you know, getting into the field, you're doing the right things by going to webinars like this, and things like reading Don't Make Me Think, and just some of the really simple things to learn out there, where there's survey tools. I think it's just a fabulous way to start.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for presenting today, Brian. And thanks to everyone who joined us online. So just to let you guys know before we leave, remember that we do offer weekly online and on-site events in more than 100 cities. And also, you can always find us on social media at Product School. And be sure to keep up with the latest product management content at productschool.com/theblog. Thank you so much, Brian. Have a great day. Yep, so if you need to continue the conversation, feel free to do so in the comments. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope to see you all next week. Thank you. Have a good one.